everybody, and welcome to People Love Clapping, How Business Groups and Communities Grow. My name is Vikram Rajan. I am the co-founder of Video Socials, which is a business community and a marketing automation app as well. And I created this LinkedIn Live and Facebook Live that happens every Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern to really learn from other business leaders and to really get inspired by them and learn lessons. So I hope you're able to learn lessons as well. This is kind of a rebirth of a podcast that I had a couple of years ago called Presenters Podcast. And I want to switch things because as running a business community with over 100 members now across the country, and we host 2 or 3 of these video blogging clubs every day, I really need to learn from folks like Ellen, who has been running her business community well over 25 years, right, Ellen?
33 years.
Now, 33. So I want to learn from her. I'm sure you're going to be able to learn from Ms. Ellen Volpe, who is the president of American Business Associates, ABA, which is one of the longest running professionally run networking organizations in the country, let alone in our Northeastern New York area. So Ellen, I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. I know we've known each other for a long time, and I consider you family. You're like an aunt to me. So it's awkward having just a business conversation like this, but we're pretending to have a purely professional business conversation. So thank you for playing along. And I know some of the answers to these questions, but nonetheless, I'm going to ask, and because I want everyone else watching on LinkedIn and YouTube, and this is going to be available through Stitcher, which is what I listen to podcasts on my Android, but also Apple, iTunes, and Google, and SoundCloud, and all over. Share with us, how did ABA begin? Why did you start it? Like, what was the kind of the turning point for you to start ABA?
Well, in 1988, unfortunately, there were literally very few groups. They were sort of good old boy networks. They were people who had clustered in business and but didn't really branch out too much. And I actually, my background is insurance administration, and I left that world sort of abruptly to find something else. And ABA actually started as a franchise in 1988, and about 4 years into my foray with the franchisor, he left. And he left because he was sort of he was before the time. People really weren't, they weren't aware that these networks really could be so powerful. And I happened to see an AT&T commercial, a handset in New York City talking to a handset in California, and the light dawned on me that this would be a very powerful opportunity. And, sort of the rest is history. My oldest group is 33 years old, and I have people with me 33 years, because networks in particular now have become, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, but even more importantly, they are one of the most important assets that a person actually can have in their life.
Sure. Well, I think it's professionally fulfilling and financially fulfilling, but also kind of emotionally, personally fulfilling as well, especially in the age that we're going through, where we have to be socially distanced and not be literally in the same room, but nonetheless yearn for that connection, let alone that it actually makes business sense and marketing sense. So
absolutely.
How did you come to this world? Like, yeah, there was that aha trigger moment of that AT&T commercial, but was there like any kind of a community type setting, any group that kind of impacted you growing up, even, just as a child or a young woman? Was there anything like that kind of had you already, that kind of tilled the soil, so to speak? Anything that had an impact?
It's sort of a very spiritual answer, because I forget what year it was, but I inherited my great aunt when she was 97. She didn't come with any money, but she came with a little box of family artifacts. Yeah. And in the box of family artifacts was a business directory from 1923, the year my father was born. And my grandmother had a very extensive network in New York City, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Manhattan, way before anybody actually knew it. Actually, nobody knew it. So when you ask me that, I have to say, it's sort of in my DNA.
It's in the blood. So was she a socialite? Like, did she host parties? Like, how did she make use of this directory?
Well, they were bakers, and and they baked for all of the dignitaries at the time. Yeah. I have a picture signed by Babe Ruth to my grandfather. They were very ingrained in the society. And as a matter of fact, my grandmother had a group of women, a sisterhood that actually raised money and built one of the first homes for the aged in New York City.
Oh, wow.
So her network was extensive, and she actually used it not for her individual gain, but to really help other people. Well, listen, at that time, people were still coming from Europe, and they were coming by themselves, or had very few connections here. And so the people that were aging here and had no connection needed a safety net to either take care of them when they were ill or bury them when they died. And there are many, many examples of those types of communities that were really some of the first networks that you could point to.
And so that was a social construct, so to speak, a social fabric that she was able to weave for others. And then a couple of generations later, you're able to create your own infrastructure, your social infrastructure for others. That's powerful. Mm-hmm. And talk to us about who are the members of ABA? Who do you see kind of fits in and belongs, so to speak? And then it's kind of awkward and insensitive, maybe politically incorrect to say those who don't belong, but who isn't it not really a great fit for? Like, have you seen that over the course of over 3 decades now, kind of a profile of who really would be successful in ABA and not really?
Well, I think that there are stages of development, one's personal development and professional development, that sort of leads them in a direction. And, as an example, I mean, children in high school should be taught how to maintain and develop their network, because each one of the sort of life chapters really is developing its own node. And those nodes can overlap, they can expand. And if one person actually understood that, and I've had a lot of people say to me that if they had only known how to develop their network when they were younger, when they're in their 50s, when all of a sudden something significant happens and changes, their level of expertise in terms of what they do is fantastic. It's just that they have no connections that actually can help them repoint where they're going and what they're doing. And I think that is that's an important point. To answer your question, I think that there, again, are different places where people will go to get a level of knowledge of how it works, because not everybody can see that that there's exponential connection and what that means. Most people think in a linear way. And if you go into a group that is less mature and your business is less mature, there is something to be gained in that environment that you may grow out of, and that you should be constantly looking for environments that actually support your growth. That being said, if you have a mature book of business and you've been around, having deep relationships, and by the way, ones that are that create frequency, because this idea of running from group to group is certainly not effective. You may get something out of that experience, but you're not getting the depth of a relationship and where that may take you. And that comes down to belief. Some people do not believe that it's worth the time staying with the same group of people for 33 years. But it's evident that things change all the time. What's not changing is the quality and the caliber of the relationship with a person. Every day, new people call you, you lose some accounts, you go off in another direction, you expand your body of knowledge to offer. All of that is constantly changing. And if you're not in relationship as those things happen, you're not actually able to take advantage of the new connections that actually get developed because of those activities.
So how do you make that judgment call? Like, is it completely self-selective, or is there a review process? Like, is there an actual formal application where you're able to, or even themselves as a potential member, able to judge that a mature book of business that itself is there a quantifiable aspect to it where you can somewhat have predictors of success where it's like, all right, this is the kind of person, or lack of a better word, like the opposite of that, where this is not going to work out, and
Right.
sure, they've got the money, they're willing to join, but maybe they're going to be around for 3 months, and that's not going to be great for anyone. So how do you make that judgment of who actually will become a member?
Well, ultimately, it is a judgment. But, I can say from my own organization that 99% of the people that are in our chapters, we have 13 or 14 now, sure. Really have come on the arms of people that are there that say, I see where you're at, and you've not experienced this, and so please be my guest. Very rarely.
Do they see it as kind of a graduation from, let's say, if they belong to another group or something, or?
Oh, I think so. I definitely think so. First of all, it's a new group of people, so sure. Or automatically, if you go into a group with 10 or 15 or even 20 or 30 people, you have a whole new weld.
Right.
And just to make sure that people understand that our groups are not for selling your services. Our groups are for developing relationships and having other people take you into their orbits because they know, like, and trust you, to steal the BNI term. And I think that without the know, like, and trust, you can't do an end run around that. I mean, you can. There are transactions being, taken place because somebody said you should use this person. But you have to stop and take the time that a lot of people are unwilling to do in order to get the relationship, that to make it a foundation where the seeds are planted and they come up every year. There's always an opportunity because the relationships are so valuable.
So as a community, I always see that, even in video socials, like, how are the members interacting, not only during the club session, but then even after, so that there is that cohesiveness that makes it even more powerful when they are kind of literally, we're on Zoom, so we're not in the same room, and how that is nowadays too. So what's the construct like? What's the agenda of a meeting, and how is it facilitating the interaction between the members?
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring it up because it has recently occurred to me. This is sort of my next litany. That Zoom, again, has made it very easy for us to visit all sorts of groups, to go to all sorts of webinars. Sure. And I hear people saying they're Zoomed out and, they register for things and then they just can't make it. All of that is true. But, it all comes down to you. It comes down to the effort that you're going to make, not at the 2-hour Zoom meeting or the 1-hour Zoom meeting. It's what are you going to do to develop rapport and relationship with the people that you're meeting with. Sure. And what does that mean? Because the truth of the matter is your father said this: you can do anything, you can't do everything.
Sure.
And that has always stuck with me. Somebody posted the other day, they were excited that all of a sudden, I forget what the milestone was, 500 or 1,000 connections on LinkedIn. And honestly, I do think that it is a milestone, but I do have to ask, how many of those connections do you actually have quality relationships with? Sure. And I just think, again, that no matter what you're doing today to network, it's all about you and the effort that you're making and the connections that you're willing to make for other people, and how you're listening to other people. Are you willing to do that? It's not really, the meetings are validation that you belong. The meetings are interesting places to meet guests that are coming into a room that, 90% of the people. These are just ways to reconnect, reunite, and stay connected in a very unusual time.
But nonetheless, as kind of leading the community, you're kind of leading the horse to water, so to speak, right? And it's up to them to drink. what happens during the meeting in terms of to kind of bring them together and get them talking? What happens outside the meeting to get them talking or interacting? Can you give examples?
I do think that that the opportunities with Zoom and breakout rooms.
Yeah.
This is what I hear most. People want to be in breakout rooms.
Yeah.
We used to meet in small groups, or the whole group used to meet.
Sure.
Again, for us to continue to foster that, and in our organization now, because we can actually cross-pollinate more easily, we used to bring people together at cross-council events that were in person, maybe 3 or 4 times a year. That meant that everybody had to get up early. They all had to come to one place. Now we have the opportunity to do those things virtually, and to actually put people into environments where they're meeting people in other councils with like minds. And it really is, it's a function of information. What can we share about the marketplace today? That would be updates and trends about the most important aspects of business and what they're going through today, the ones that are expanding and exploding, and those people that are struggling. And so we find that market intelligence is really looking under the hood and giving people an opportunity to make decisions about their own business, because if they didn't hear something, they might be going down a different road.
And so, that's baked in, where like you're going around the room, so to speak, at least now, and people are sharing kind of where they are and what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not at every single meeting, obviously, but that is one of the strongest opportunities that we have. As an example, our New York City group, probably maybe I'll just say over half of the people are in categories that are design, construction, and real estate focused. And that is an incredible wealth of knowledge. And even the people that are outside of design, construction, and real estate are really benefiting by what people are going through. In particular, the positive parts. We hear a lot of negativity, but when you hear certain people actually doing major transactions in the city at a time that everybody thinks the city is falling apart, it's very inspiring for people.
Sure. It gives people hope and ideas.
Right.
That's really cool. So one of the things, another aspect that I think about in terms of communities and how I'm growing video socials, kind of, lack of a better word, the repeatables. There are rituals, things that you say, words that you say, things that you do inside the meeting, outside and that kind of brand, not only ABA, but also brand membership is kind of like a card carrying member, literally, figuratively. And how does that happen? And did you and I know, so as an ABA member, I know some of the jargon, so to speak, like opportunity calls, etc. Can you share some of them? Like, what are the things that you tend to repeat often, constructed in the meeting, but then even members also tend to kind of use as your phrases? And how did they come about? And did you kind of architect them that way, or did they just come about over the course of 33 years? So can you share with us some of the repeatables that people say, people do, and how do you kind of govern that? How do you see that happening with members?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think people use their own language, but I think it's more, not so much the words, but more, I think of your father again, more spirit. And I think that people recognize that we are not, as an organization, selling each other, although plenty of people pull connections towards them because they are experts. And because we're together sharing our expertise, people will gravitate to those people that they really would like to do business with because they see them that way. But it's hard for me to think of words. I mean, opportunity calls, house calls, one-on-ones. Networking is not rocket science. And it's really important to recognize that, in my opinion, that understanding how relationships work, what is appropriate in terms of making introductions. How do you do it? Even the most seasoned people, I think, really forget sometimes sort of the basis of developing rapport and relationship, making connections for other people.
Sure.
It's hard for me to come up with the words because, lately I've been using weak ties because I think that, and that's not my word. I'm not really sure whose word it is. I think Rob Cross is the where I get it from, or maybe Wayne Baker. But weak ties are connections to other people that are not. They're not your natural affinity. You don't really know these people.
Kind of goes back to the 600, 1,000 people on LinkedIn, so to speak. That nice vanity metric,
but weak ties. If I introduce you to, let me think of somebody that I recently met, Mike Greenlee, who you may know, and you should know him. He's a very unique person. But if I introduce you to him and you meet him, he's a weak tie. I'm not introducing you because he wants to be on video socials or there's some connection that I see.
Yeah.
Right. But the people that he knows become weak ties. That's a whole other universe of people that you can hopefully, if it makes sense, find yourself into another node.
Sure.
And I think that's one of the things that, so using that term is basically giving people another way of looking at the connections that don't seem to be, that apparent.
Right.
So
it's like the tangents to our circles of influence, so to speak.
Absolutely. I always think of the bullseye, and the center of the bullseye is really your strong connection or the room. But it's all those. Each one of those people has a sphere of their own that sort of exponentially goes out, and from the center of the room, if you want to get to those other spheres, somebody has to take you there.
Yeah.
And unless you're willing to spend the time and understand that, you may have a hard time getting out to those other extremities.
So, which is a nice segue into kind of how members and their own circles impact the growth of ABA, and how has that happened? How strategic has that been? Where, over the course of 33 years, and having members who have been around for 33 years. I mean, these are raving fans, to use that phrase. So it becomes kind of a natural part of their life, literally life. I mean, it's like, their kids are adult kids, right? I mean, people have become grandparents through the course of ABA. So I'm imagining just over the course of 33 years. So how does that invitation culture happen, and what kind of systems do you have in place where, sure, members are kind of here and there inviting people, but is there any kind of systematic way that you approach it where you're saying, all right, how are members helping grow this chapter and this council and kind of create that growth mechanism? Like how do you work that?
I think that there's two ways to look at this. First of all, the example that you just gave, I'm probably the only one that knows that your father gave you a keyboard when I think you were 3.
I think it was 5 or 6, but yes.
And I knew you then. More importantly, it's an interesting question that you ask, because it's not as easy as just going into your LinkedIn and saying, I have these 5 people and, go get them.
Sure.
It's not really, it doesn't really work that way. Although, just recently through Beth Granger, we learned this little technique on LinkedIn that allows me to actually go into yours, put in a type of business category, let's say accountants, and remind you of the ones that are in your database that you might be able to help me with.
Yeah.
Which, when you call that strategic, it's very strategic, because you may or may not know them, but I do have an opportunity to ask you. Right. If you do, you might make a personal connection, or I then can reach out to them and say, I noticed that you're connected to Vikram. do you have a few minutes? I'd like to learn more about your business and tell you a little bit about mine, however that works.
Yeah.
But more importantly, members that are happy and that are aware of the people around them are willing to bring people as guests.
Yeah.
And we're not really selling memberships. We're really looking for people who want to come into already existing environments to sort of, expand their horizons and also bring their connections into the room.
Sure.
So I have, again, a phrase, you can't push a string. And when it's supposed to happen, I'm a very, very sort of energetic, spiritually motivated person.
Sure.
And I just believe that when the right time appears, somebody is going to say, you definitely need to come to ABA. And that's what happens. I don't like to say that, you have to call me and we have to have a meeting and I have to discuss. And I just think that putting too many if, ands, or buts in situations, that you miss the spontaneous opportunity to just have somebody, come. And that happened with Carol Krugly and Devin Kolka. Carol went to some event, I don't remember which it was, and she actually met Devin. And the morning after she met him for the first time, she invited him. And that's a great example, because Devin not only is an incredible person, a great member, but is also involved in leukemia lymphoma and has done things that are extraordinary for the organization. And it all started with Carol. And it started because Devin was open and interested. And, again, I just think that those things, you can't compare that to going onto some list and looking for the name and the business of the. So, we invite most people, people that are not, what can I say? Where they are is not up to this. They'll self-select themselves out. They'll say, I don't have a book of business yet, or I belong to too many groups, or it's never really an issue. I mean, the issue is we're always interested in meeting new people. That is a lifelong, as Bob Middleman says, a lifelong issue. But in today's world, because networks are, since last February have become so much more powerful and so much more important, we have very rarely a meeting where we don't have interesting people coming. And, we're very fortunate.
And that's a nice segue again. You're making it see success indicators. Like, are there early signs? Like, sure, longevity, right? They've been around 33 years. Obviously, they're happy. They're people inviting guests, right? That's another success indicator. They're a raving fan. Are there early indicators of success, like before they get to that point, before the 33rd year, and before they're bringing guests on a regular basis, because that's just part of who they are naturally as personality, and of course, because of your system? Are there things that you look at, kind of like KPI, right? Like key performance indicators, I want to say is KPI. Are there metrics or things like that you kind of see as symptomatic?
So it's so interesting that you asked me this, because I was talking with Jean last night about archetypes. And we were laughing because, we think that we could do a disc for network archetypes.
Sure.
In other words, who are they? What are these different personality types that actually exist within groups?
Sure.
I'm tickled by it, because there are some that just come in and they're electric. Their energy is so attractive as human beings that people are interested in meeting them. that for a new person is, oh wow, I'm just coming into this environment and all these people are interested in me.
Right.
That
Sure.
that feels really good. And I do think that those people that are somewhat reluctant or that are sitting back, and
Sure.
I look for these people, because if they are sitting back,
You mean literally body language sitting back, right?
well, in terms of, the hokey pokey, they're not putting their whole self in yet. And I think that's because it's like a new environment and people are trying to figure it out.
Right.
Then there are those people that are just, way too much energy, what I'm thinking about is Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. The burnout is extraordinary with people whose archetype is to constantly help. And I hesitate to say this, but what is the reasoning behind that? What is the motivator, the driver? Is it so that they get the kudos, or are they just so interested in helping other people that they forget to put the mask on themselves, and they end up saying, I never get anything.
Yeah, right.
Well, they're so busy giving that they haven't focused on what they really would like to get for themselves.
Interesting perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it happens a lot, honestly. Yeah. It does happen a lot. So, but this again comes with experience. Yeah. I love a person that doesn't have that much experience coming into the room and actually observing the behavior of the people that are getting it.
And what are those kind of behaviors that you tend to see that kind of give you a clue of like, all right, this guy's getting it or she's getting it?
Oh, well, it's I remember Chuck Schwartz. He now is with Markham in South Carolina, and he was in the technology business when he was in ABA many years ago. And Chuck used to say to me, I'm just coming to ABA to hear my name. And what he meant was, we have a piece of the meeting where we thank each other.
Okay.
And he couldn't really, he loved helping people. Now, he also got, he had a good balance, but, his motivation was to help as many people as he could. Yeah. And part of his weekly, monthly behavior was to actually make connection for people. And so, again, different motivation will define your what can I say, how fast or slow you get to a fully functioning, developed network. But again, I think that there are archetypes that definitely, I can think of two people who came to ABA. And they were the shyest people. And in the beginning, it was really, really hard for them to even introduce themselves. Yeah. And now they're superstars. So I just think that, we're all learning, we're all growing, we're all observing the behavior that other people are exhibiting and saying, if that guy's doing it, I can do it myself.
Sure. Right.
It's sort of permission.
Yeah.
It's just been a blessing to observe. It's a blessing to observe my facilitators who all have come out of being members. So the spirit is there. Sure. Bob Middleman, Joe Giametta, Bob Putt, Beth Granger, Jean Brown. They're all they're mimics. They see it and they Bob Putt says the hair club for men. I tried it. I liked it. And now, it's for me. Yeah. So it definitely is contagious.
That's interesting. That I like that also. That is that a success indicator? Do you see where you want members to become facilitators or not necessarily? Like, is that a stage?
I do think that that's a huge advantage, and it has been for us. Because they've seen it from the other side, from being out in the room, in the group, and that gives them a whole different perspective on what our philosophy is, and it allows them to take the knowledge that they've gained.
Yeah.
Bob Putt, I think, has been with me for 18 years. Bob Middleman, 17 years, I think. Jean's been doing 20 years.
Yeah.
These are seasoned facilitators. They're not just people that say, I think I want to do a group.
Right.
Because it's not that simple, because you have to actually identify and be able to identify how connection is made. What does that mean? What are natural affinities? And
Right.
how do you create an environment where people actually, as a sixth sense, understand that, so that when they're meeting with someone, I can't help it. I meet with someone and I have 8 names that I've written down, because I know what they do. I know who that is important for, and I know who they know, and I know who that's important for. So, that doesn't come easily in a world where we think of things in a linear way.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well, that's an art unto itself, and that you've honed, being a leader and kind of growing this community. So that's powerful. Talk to us about timetable as we wrap up. Kind of how do you see ABA evolving and growing in 2021? And I mean, obviously we're on Zoom now because we have to be, but hopefully, by summertime, definitely by the fall, I think we'll be back to being in person to some degree. We're all hoping to some degree. So from that aspect, how do you see the timetable of ABA growing in 2021 and next year?
Yeah, well, we were fortunate last year. 2020 was really a fantastic year. And we're off to the races already in January, and now coming into February, which is hard to believe. And so I just see that continuing. We actually build personal groups for people that have a big reach with people, but no frequency with the right ones. And
how is that process? Like, do you do a lot of them now? Is that another extension?
Yeah, I mean, there's always maintaining a functioning group as it exists today. But in terms of growing, we are looking for individuals who are frustrated with having a lot of connection, having some special people, but not really having any frequency with them. And so, we look to have conversations with people around that situation. The moving forward is probably the question I get every day, and my feeling. This is my feeling that there have been habits that have been formed in this past 12 months that have to do with virtual experiences, and I don't think that they are going to just go back into the bottle. I think that there's a lot of silver lining that is associated with these virtual meetings. And I suspect that it will be a hybrid, that maybe morning meetings will remain virtual, but lunchtime meetings or dinners, or for us, cross-council events, we will go back to in-person, but I don't think it will be 100%, because this is somewhat too convenient. And you don't have to drive in traffic, and you can take your child to school, and there's just so many silver linings where this is concerned, that when the smoke clears and we get to really look at it, I think we'll see that we will be keeping some of these new habits because they make sense.
That's excellent. This has been really, really helpful. I appreciate you taking the time and kind of giving us that story of how ABA has grown and how it's continued to blossom and evolve and grow. So it's been really, really great. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I'm just pleased to be here. And, we go back a long time.
We do.
And, it's my pleasure to be with you and to actually see the professional that you grew into. Because when I first met you, I think you were just graduating.
I was just graduating. I was 22 or 23 at the time. And here I am, many decades after.
That's
and so we have to do it again, I think more often. It doesn't have to be live and streaming like this. Last question. Is there another business group or business community, especially another leader, especially that you not necessarily that you're a member of, a part of ABA necessarily, but that you look to and that you admire and that you're a fan of?
There are a few. I would be remiss not mentioning Adrian.
Okay, great.
Adrian and I go back about 30 years. She was a member. And I joke around. She's probably the one and only person that ever handed me a check at the meeting. But, I think, we're both, I think, doing good by helping people connect and create community. And as I said, I would be remiss not to mention her.
Anyone else come to mind?
Well, I'm happy to see Beth Granger with her LinkedIn groups.
Sure.
And Jeff Goldberg, he has his sales group. And I think that those are unique places, and they're certainly unique people.
Yep.
And so, if I said the three that I think are great, I think they're great. And,
that's awesome.
And I think
they're great too.
We're great too.
Fair enough. But with that, we're going to conclude. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ellen.